Yeah, I'm very happy actually that we're starting from Matta, a young gallery from Milan, for a very special presentation of Clara Hastrup. Maybe you want to tell us why you wanted to start from here?
I didn't know Matta before, and it's a real discovery for me of the artist Clara Hastrup and the gallery. I think it's also very audacious how they present it in a fair context, creating this black box, kind of this invitation to come in. And what I've been witnessing is that not only they're standing in front, but they've been actively engaging with the people coming in and passerbys to enter. And I think this is what we want also from galleries now in working these fairs, is to have this moment when we feel welcome and hosted. And I think this is really important. The sense of hospitality that Matta represents directly drove us inside and made us discover this great presentation by Clara.
And also questioning in a way this frontality that usually booths have at fair, no? Like the idea that you don't necessarily have to have everything in your face, but you can also, as you said, invite to discover, create the interest and the need to discover something rather than immediately have it presented in your face, no?
Yeah, it's a really unusual presentation for an art fair context, I think, both because it's so sophisticated technologically, also working with fish and water in a gallery space in a fair context. I'm like, that's amazing.
I just really want to emphasize on the fact that this comes from a new entries position. It's a young gallery that does that. It's not a gallery who's comfortable enough to be able to be so experimental, but from the get-go they decide to really establish themselves as a gallery, like a program that really will favor the artist practice, or the artist place before the context or the commercial value.
Maybe it's time to actually walk in and discover it together. Talking to the artist today, and she said that this whole project started from a question like what would the sound of fish sound like, basically, no?
Yeah, so we have the sensors up top on the aquarium, and then they detect the shadows of the fish, so the movement of the fish actually triggers the xylophones and the tambourines up that we have kind of as lighting elements as well. So it's aleatory, it's by chance. I mean, the artist said what I thought was really interesting is that there's an element of care that is also brought into an art fair context. That was something that they really had to consider, how to take care of the fish. It's a very delicate ecosystem within the tank itself, and they have specific conditions that they
and she was telling me that these are fishes from sweet waters in the tropical sort of context, and they reproduce very quickly. So there's an element in which the idea is that in time the number of fishes in the tanks will be more potentially, and so this will actually generate different sounds compared to the sounds we're hearing now. But we also have to accept that biology has a life, so we have to accept the fact that they might also decrease in terms of population, and so that eventually maybe in the future it will also go silent, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is this piece is about maybe what the fish would sound like, but it's also about navigations and traces
and authorship
as well. It's also about how movements create sounds, and the question of authorship is very interesting here, because you could also ask yourself,
a non-human musical composition,
where does the music, who signs this composition? Is it going to be recorded? Is it maybe we can expect a vinyl or a performance of it, and who's it be? I think it touches to many interesting questions.
No, I think, Lisa, it was very interesting what you said before, the fact of how courageous the presentation of Matta is, especially coming from, as you were saying, a young gallery, which it's quite daring. And in general, the presence of media, as opposed to biennials where moving images and time-based practice are predominant, in fairs, as we know, they're very rare because, of course, commercially they're more difficult. So maybe you could tell us what you think about that?
Not only because, commercial, yes, but also because nobody has really a lot of time during fairs. We just kind of, go and there's so many things going on, there's so many booths, so you don't really have you don't really take the time to sit in time-based media and to watch a full movie video or engage with an artwork really, and that's a pity for real. But I also understand that the art fairs are tricky for this, and they're not really like constructed for it.
Yeah, the viewing conditions aren't ideal, right? We have a lot of light, which usually with projection, you need a dimly lit space. And the sound is also a tricky question. So either you have a very loud sound, which would bother, the people around you or the other booths, or you have headphones, or you turn the sound off. In specific cases that works. We'll see that shortly in the booth that we're going to now, East Contemporary.
The booth of East Contemporary, a young gallery from Milan, presenting the work of Aziza Kairi. Aziza is an artist based in London, coming from Uzbekistan. She recently presenting the Uzbekistan pavilion at the Venice Biennale.
She's super impressive.
Very young and at this moment, but the research and the relation between technology and craft, but also traditional craft from the region of Uzbekistan is very interesting.
These two works are titled Conversation with AI. And they come from a body of work that is also represented in the pavilion in Venice, no?
Venice, yeah, exactly. So these works take shapes of traditional embroideries, but trying to put them in a modern eye and with a modern symbol. So we can see here there's a bicycle, but in the style of traditional craftsmanship and from the region.
I think it's also really beautiful and interesting to think how knowledge is passed on over generations and kind of inherited knowledges, matriarchal lineages maybe also that get passed on, and how new technologies and older knowledge or older technologies like weaving kind of come together and create a new hybrid moment of visual language, I guess. And we have a little bit of a overlap maybe between Clara Hastrup that's creating it's also a language model in a way, and here we have an AI, I guess a visual model yesterday when we were speaking to the artist she told us that when it takes the imagery that she feeds into it, sometimes it gives back stereotypical or more racist imagery or difficult imagery, so it has to be adapted, and there's the psychological moment of working with the AI, of correcting it or kind of.
But it also underline the bias of technology now, because technology is biased in a way, and then AI as well, and so we might we also have to kind of educate it and to learn or to teach the machine or the intelligence how to get out of the stereotypes that
it's very interesting how an artwork can do that, because of course the vast majority of images that are shared online come from a Western perspective. So of course the analyzing the images that she feeds to the AI starts from those parameters, and so it's up to her to modify it. And I was told that it's kind of conceived as a triptych, in the sense that the first image is the original embroidery, the screen in the center is where the conversation between the artist and the AI happens. And then the third one is actually the image at some point of the result that she decides to extract.
Almost kind of it's surrealist. I mean, at the end you see this body becoming a bicycle with 5 different wheels, or it has this whole imaginary or that is only possible, I think, with the artist's mind and the AI's mind, and I think this is quite special.
And I think also what's really important to consider is that a lot of times technology is considered within a very violent kind of infrastructure frame, but to remember that we can use technologies, that the technology itself is maybe more neutral, but then it's the way we engage with it, the context we give it, the values we inscribe into these technologies that then write and continue to work. So it's important for artists and people in general to engage it with technologies in these, or new technologies in these ways where it's positive, affirmative, empowering, all of these things that can make it grow.
And in terms of a conversation, a conversation has a beginning and it has an end, no? So I was asking myself, when is this finishing? When is the conversation ending? And it's interesting to me that it's when the personal comes in, when the artist decides that what is appearing, what is coming out of the AI elaboration resonates with her own personal history. So in that sense, that's when she takes out an image and goes back to the artisan. So it's a full circle. You start from the traditional embroidery, through technology and then go back to the artisan.
But also the installation makes this like process going on. It looks like this kind of machine that like is printing is processing, you know. It feels like it's in movement, but yet only the screen produces movements. And the installation really, I'm kind of expecting it to roll down more and more, like as if it was a live kind of printing doing.
Absolutely. We will have a big jump in terms of generation and in terms of time.
We like
We're
that.
like time
Like
travelers.
that, exactly. Time travelers, time travelers.
Not only storytellers, also time travelers.
Exactly. Here we are, Rolf Art, a gallery from Buenos Aires, and the presentation of Liliana Maresca, a very rich solo presentation of the very important Argentinian artist. I know that you wanted to start from this very iconic series from the 80s, no?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a real discovery. I didn't know the artist before. And just like diving, this presentation in general is so generous because it allows us to like really dive into this rich practice, even though it was a short practice, if I understood quite well, because Liliana Maresca died in a pretty young age.
Unfortunately, 1994, yes, of AIDS.
Her whole work and like her engagement and activism and performance and sculpture, all of this was just so important, and like to be able to like dive not only into one specific work but two or three is very generous. And this is for why it was kind of, for me, it was a no-brainer. It was like, oh, but we must talk about it.
Yeah, and her work was also extremely influential, not only for future generation in Argentina, but also beyond in Latin America and beyond Latin America, no?
Yeah, exactly.
For me, it was also a real discovery, and I think it was interesting to learn about an artist practice who had a real scene and who also created a big community around herself and brought a lot of people together and always was collaborating with other people. And also we see here collaborating with sculptures that she's built that are actually now in the Reina Sofia. And it's really because of that museum also that a lot of her work, a lot of the documentation has been made available again to us. So I feel like there's still a lot of momentum growing.
Yeah, she's currently on show at MoMA. This piece, as you were saying, is in the collection of Reina Sofia. And I think there's something in the use of her presence and her body that really pushes away any element of fragility. She kind of this funny element that looks like an armor. No, it's playful, but it's also extremely strong at the same time. No, like it really feels like a shield of her breast.
But that maybe also points to a specific type of fragility. No, like the body engaging with this type of prosthesis or armor, as you might call it, and this extension in a way, but also a barrier, I would say.
So this series was developed in the 80s during the military dictatorship. So Liliana was mostly staying at home, and I think it's quite interesting that it's parallel to a piece of the 90s where actually the practice is finally able to free and be presented outside. No,
she also like kind of felt the urgency of like also taking space and like being outside and being a militant for what she believes in, like a political situation in Argentina. It's a performance, it's photographs, but it's also like sculptures, being like with the pink art. It's like all of like mixed media present here, but also with a very strong message, and really like this militantism that we find in her practice.
But she also knew that she needed to document her actions for whatever reason, and in a feminist historical outlook, I guess it's one of the things that becomes really noticeable is like the importance of creating your own history, of writing your own history, because even until today, a lot of the times that doesn't actually happen, or it didn't happen for a lot of female artists. So she was creating her own kind of narrative. Unfortunately, as we talked about, it ended very early. So that gives us a lot of the rich history that she has and of the actions and the performative moments that, obviously we wouldn't have as physical material anymore.
Wonderful. So now we're moving actually to the opposite curated section, the present future section,
which is really facing the facing each
quite
other.
Interesting, no?
Also very much thinking about the female body.
Yeah, and it's still like in the feminist position, but like it's interesting to see how like a historical feminist position is, and like the dialogue with a really contemporary and young position now here with Costanza Candeloro showing with Martina Simetti.
And so it's interesting, once again, the use of the space of the booth. You have this wall, you have 2 works here and 3 works.
Exactly, but then here we have like some drawings taken from publications in which she realizes like how the female body is used for commercial gain. I mean, there is like a famous illustration. The one that I particularly like is this ticket pic from this restaurant Augenblick, with the image of like these
Female eyes.
yeah, these feminized eyes in the Bahnhofstrasse, and like saying how much it is, but like this also already
You were
the
served
name.
by Susanna.
Exactly. And this one here that says, at the art gallery, please don't move, you look more beautiful than all these pictures, translated not in 1 but like in 4 different languages.
It's very playful. There is this light bulbs that become like a breast, or like this other bulb that sort of recalls the shape of a female body, no?
Of course, but I think to understand really like this research, which should also look at the other part of the booth, in which there is a crucial element and a crucial work. There is the ceramic by Costanza, and this sculpture made out of ceramic is actually a discarded packet of like Vogue cigarettes, and she was saying that like these typical like Vogue cigarettes were produced for a female ideal. You know, they were made
Thinner, longer.
and purple and it gone, and so Costanza decided to like crush it, this like deconstruct this like packet and put it on, and then inside of it you can see that there's a writing that says number 1, production, reproduction. That is the title of a chapter from a famous Italian feminist writer,
Leopoldina Fortunati, no?
exactly, and who kind of like also mixed the idea of like the female body in a capitalist system, and I think this sets the tone for the whole.
And I think it's interesting because the work is very playful. Has a cartoon-like character. It's poppy. It doesn't seem too serious, but it's actually based on these extremely serious feminist Marxist texts that, you know, completely changed the discourse at the time in the 70s about what domestic labor means, female labor in the house, housework, what all that means, and how it actually feeds into capital.
Amazing. Now let's move on to the final proposition.
So we've been like jumping a lot from in time, really. We've been like space travelers, time travelers, but we're going now again to like very contemporary artists,
Yeah.
quite young as well as like the others that we had, and whose research and like work is also very like rooted and loaded with theoretical content.
We're here at Clima Gallery from Milan, and we're in front of Marie Matouz's work. And I know, Mohamed, that you have or are planning to work with, but you already have at Kunsthalle Basel a beautiful presentation by the artist, no?
Yeah, so I must say, like, Marie Matouz is an amazing artist who lives in Basel. My predecessor invited to do the Backwall Commission of this year. So she just which opened in September of this year, the whole installation composed of like this series of work that is part of like 33 pieces in the whole wall. With Marie, we did a solo show at Cherish, and again, she, against all logic, decided to use the garden for her show, and you decided to use it as a stage. And so what she did is a sculpture of a pond that she digged in our garden, and like created this pond that people could gather, and invited some performers and concerts and musicians to go and like for a full weekend of a music festival around this pond. And it's again using this term of sculpture in a different way.
Yeah, but it's interesting you're referring to the pond, because when I saw this proposition of yours, I think reflection is extremely... No, yes, absolutely, because reflection is extremely important, yeah. And this circular shape, the idea of a pond is also this idea of creating a surface that reflects what happens around its shore, no?
And I think when you're speaking about moving images, I think in like this work, it is typically a moving image because the reflection works such as, it's about gazing into ourselves, but like the reflection that comes in the movement and whatever surrounds us in there. So it takes the shape or the form of a vitrine, but it acts as a reflective space, and in which you can barely like, or like almost discover like what the vitrine is holding. And so I think she challenges this and creates these moving images that we are performing. Yeah, we trigger, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess we started.
Joe Bear moment.
But also we started with fishes triggering an artwork and triggering music, and we close on us being reflected in a surface and finally being, activating and triggering.
It's like we're in the tank.
We are in the tank.
We're in the tank.
Yeah, we're gonna go into the infrastructure.
Exactly.
We don't know where the end is.
Yeah.
Well, on this note, I think we can close this wonderful tour. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for following, and thank you for being with us.